She lost her job unfairly. Her grandma is sick and the bills keep piling up. And then fate decides to laugh. Her first temp gig throws her right in front of a bank CEO who controls everything, down to his breathing. But suddenly, his public image needs a perfect girlfriend, and she becomes the #1 pick with a contract so bizarre it feels like a prank. Vanessa Porter had always believed that hard work would eventually pay off. She'd spent 3 years fighting for recognition in the marketing department of global tech industries, arriving early, staying late, and pouring her creativity into campaigns that her supervisor claimed as his own. She told herself it was all part of climbing the ladder. That Monday morning proved her terribly wrong. "We're letting you go, Miss Porter." Her supervisor didn't even have the decency to look apologetic. "The Reynolds campaign failed because someone leaked our strategy to competitors. The evidence points to you." Vanessa's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee mug. "That's impossible. I would never—" "Security will escort you out." He was already looking at his phone, dismissing her like yesterday's news. "We'll mail your final paycheck." The walk through the office, past colleagues who suddenly found their computer screens fascinating, felt like a fever dream. 20 minutes later, she stood on the sidewalk with a cardboard box of desk plants and stress balls, watching her career crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. Her phone buzzed. Grandma Lillian's caretaker. "Vanessa, your grandmother had a small episode this morning. Nothing serious, but the doctor wants to increase her medication. That'll be an additional $300 monthly." Of course, because the universe had a twisted sense of humor. By Wednesday, Vanessa had sent 47 resumes into the void and received exactly 0 responses. Her savings account was doing an excellent impression of the Sahara Desert. When her best friend Maya texted about a temporary position as an assistant for a corporate event planning company, Vanessa didn't hesitate. "It's just setting up chairs and managing vendor deliveries," Maya explained over coffee that afternoon. "The pay is decent and Marcus, my boss, is pretty laid back. Plus free fancy appetizers. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion." "You had me at pay," Vanessa said, managing her first genuine smile in 3 days. The Grandview Hotel ballroom on Friday evening sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the kind of opulence that made Vanessa's rented studio apartment weep. She wore black slacks and a simple white blouse, the unofficial uniform of invisible service staff. "Table 7 needs adjustment," Marcus called out, gesturing toward the back. "And make sure the ice sculptures don't start melting before 6. The client is particular." Particular turned out to be a dramatic understatement. Vanessa was directing the florist through his 3rd rearrangement of the centerpieces when she heard the voice, deep, clipped, and radiating the kind of authority that made people instinctively straighten their spines. "This is completely unacceptable." She turned to find a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair styled with casual precision, glaring at the cake display as if it had personally insulted his ancestors. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that probably intimidated board members into submission. "The cake is off-center by 3 inches, he continued, addressing a terrified-looking caterer. 3 inches. Do you understand what that communicates to my guests? Sloppiness, lack of attention to detail, mediocrity." Vanessa felt her jaw tighten. She'd had a monumentally terrible week, and watching someone throw a tantrum over cake positioning was apparently her breaking point. "Excuse me," she said, stepping forward before her common sense could stop her. "But maybe your guests will be too busy actually enjoying themselves to measure the cake's alignment with a ruler." The room went silent. Marcus's face drained of color. The man turned slowly, fixing Vanessa with a stare that could freeze lava. "And you are. Someone who thinks perfection is admirable, but kindness shouldn't be optional." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "That caterer has been here since 5 this morning. Maybe a please wouldn't kill you." His eyes narrowed. For a moment, Vanessa wondered if she'd just torpedoed her 2nd job in 1 week. Then his expression shifted into something colder than winter in Alaska. "Move the cake 3 inches to the left," he said to the caterer, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then to Vanessa, "Stay out of matters you don't understand." He walked away, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor with irritating precision. "Do you have a death wish?" Maya appeared at her elbow, eyes wide. That's Calvin Henderson, as in Henderson Banking Corporation, as in owns half the city and could buy the other half before lunch rich. Well, Mr. Henderson is also a first-class jerk, Vanessa muttered, aggressively adjusting a napkin that didn't need adjusting. A first-class jerk who could have Marcus blacklisted from every event in the city, Maya whispered urgently. Please tell me you're going to apologize. Vanessa looked across the ballroom where Calvin Henderson was now critiquing the lighting setup, his profile sharp against the chandeliers. Something about his rigid posture, the way he held himself apart from everyone else, struck her as profoundly lonely despite the crowd of people scurrying to please him. Then she remembered his condescending tone, and that lonely feeling evaporated. Not a chance, she said. If I see him again, it'll be too soon. The universe, as it turned out, was still laughing at her. Because 3 hours later, a vendor dispute over unpaid invoices erupted near the entrance, voices rising loud enough to disturb the arriving guests. And when Vanessa rushed over to mediate, trying to smooth things over before the situation escalated, she found herself defending the vendor's right to basic respect and timely payment. She didn't notice Calvin Henderson watching from across the room, his expression unreadable, or the way his public relations director leaned in to whisper something that made him frown. She was too busy trying to salvage what remained of her dignity and this temporary job. But Calvin Henderson noticed her, and that, though neither of them knew it yet, would change everything. Calvin Henderson had learned early in life that control was everything. Control meant predictability. Predictability meant success, and success meant never having to depend on anyone but himself. At 35, he'd built Henderson Banking Corporation into one of the most respected financial institutions on the East Coast through sheer force of will and an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. So when his head of client relations, Patricia Whitmore, cornered him in his office on Monday morning with a face that promised bad news, Calvin's first instinct was to check what he'd missed. "We have a problem," Patricia said, closing the door behind her. "The Ashford Group is threatening to pull their accounts." Calvin looked up from his laptop. The Ashford Group represented $18 million in assets and had been with Henderson Banking for 3 generations. "On what grounds?" "They're concerned about your personal stability." Patricia chose her words carefully. Direct quote, "We prefer to do business with men who understand the value of family and commitment." Calvin's jaw tightened. "My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities." "I agree. They don't." Patricia sat down, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Calvin, you're brilliant at what you do. But these are old money clients with old-fashioned values. They see a 35-year-old bachelor who works 18-hour days and has no serious relationships. To them, that signals instability. That's archaic. That's business." She pulled out her tablet. "And it gets worse. Your cousin Brandon's engagement scandal made page 6 this morning. Calvin's cousin, his main rival for the CEO position and a man with the business acumen of a goldfish, had recently gotten engaged to a society darling who turned out to have a rather colorful past. The tabloids were having a field day, and by extension the Henderson name was being dragged through gossip columns. Calvin read the headline and felt a headache forming behind his eyes. This is ridiculous. This is reality. The board is concerned. Our more conservative clients are spooked, and frankly, Patricia leaned forward, you need to give them something to feel good about. Show them you're not just a workaholic robot, that you have a life outside these walls. I have Enzo, Calvin said dryly, referring to his temperamental Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. A dog doesn't count. Patricia stood. Think about it. A stable relationship, a nice girlfriend, some normal human behavior. It would go a long way. After she left, Calvin stared at the city skyline through his floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd sacrificed relationships, friendships, and countless personal moments to build this company. The idea that his success could be undermined by something as arbitrary as his dating life was infuriating. His phone buzzed, a text from his publicist, Diane. "Calvin, we need to talk about Friday night." He'd almost forgotten about the charity gala, one of those necessary evils where wealthy people paid obscene amounts for mediocre wine and the illusion of philanthropy. He'd attended out of obligation, spent the evening critiquing everything from the floral arrangements to the cake placement, and left early to go over quarterly reports. Diane called before he could text back. "Please tell me you didn't actually argue with the event staff," she said without preamble. "I gave constructive feedback on their setup." "You made a caterer cry, Calvin." He frowned. Had he? He vaguely remembered someone being emotional, but the whole evening was a blur of inefficiency and poor planning. If people can't handle professional standards. And then there was that moment with the vendor dispute, Diane continued, where that woman jumped in to defend the vendor. Calvin remembered that part more clearly. The woman with honey-brown hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing simple black pants and a white shirt, had positioned herself between an irate vendor and hotel management. She'd been calm but firm, speaking with the kind of quiet authority that commanded attention without raising her voice. What about her? "The photographers caught you watching her. There are 3 photos of you looking at her with what could be interpreted as interest." Diane's tone shifted, taking on that calculated edge she got when she had an idea. "Calvin, this could actually work in our favor." "I'm not following." "You need a relationship to stabilize your image." She looked like exactly the kind of wholesome, down-to-earth woman that would appeal to your conservative clients. "What if we made this a thing?" Calvin pinched the bridge of his nose. "You want me to pretend to date a woman I don't know based on 3 photographs? I want you to save your company's reputation." Diane's voice hardened. "Look, I know it sounds crazy, but we're in damage control mode. Brandon's scandal, the Ashford Group wavering, the board questioning your commitment. This is the perfect solution. A few public appearances with a nice girlfriend, some carefully crafted social media posts, and suddenly you're not the cold, calculating bachelor. You're a man capable of real human connection. This is insane. This is PR. I'll have my team track her down, make sure she's clean, no skeletons that'll bite us later. Then you can approach her with a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "The contractual kind. These things are done all the time, Calvin. We set parameters, compensation, a time frame. She plays the role of your girlfriend for a few months, long enough to stabilize things, and then you part ways amicably. Everyone wins." After hanging up, Calvin sat in the silence of his office. The idea was absurd. Hiring someone to pretend to care about him was possibly the most depressing thing he'd ever considered. But as he looked at the numbers on his screen, the projected losses if major clients started pulling out, the board meeting scheduled for next month where his position would be questioned, the absurd started looking pragmatic. His assistant knocked softly. "Mr. Henderson?" Enzo's walker just called. He bit through another leash. Calvin closed his eyes. Even his dog was a disaster. That evening in his penthouse apartment with its minimalist furniture and strategic lack of warmth, Calvin found Enzo sulking in his designer dog bed. The small spaniel looked up with liquid brown eyes that held zero remorse. "You can't keep terrorizing the dog walkers," Calvin said, loosening his tie. "Eventually, no one will agree to take you." Enzo huffed and turned his back, which was his signature move when feeling dramatic. Calvin's phone buzzed with an email from Diane. She'd found the woman from the gala. Vanessa Porter, 29, recently unemployed from Global Tech Industries, caring for an ill grandmother, currently working temporary jobs to make ends meet. Clean background, no scandals, no complicated relationships. In other words, desperate enough to consider an unusual offer and unlikely to have ulterior motives. Calvin looked at Enzo, who had turned back around and was now staring at him with an expression that seemed almost judgmental. "Don't look at me like that," Calvin muttered. "I'm trying to save a company, not win a morality contest." Enzo sneezed, which Calvin chose to interpret as canine commentary on his life choices. The plan was simple. Approach Vanessa Porter with a business proposition, a contract that would solve both their problems, his image issue, her financial crisis. It would be temporary, transactional, and completely under control. Calvin had always been good at control. What he didn't anticipate was that Vanessa Porter would be very, very bad for his carefully maintained order, and that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you couldn't plan for. But he'd find that out soon enough. Vanessa was halfway through explaining to her grandmother why she couldn't afford the upgraded cable package when someone knocked on her apartment door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and in her neighborhood unexpected visitors usually meant someone had the wrong address or was trying to sell something she didn't need. "Hold on, Grandma," she said into the phone, padding across the worn carpet in her fuzzy socks. She opened the door and froze. Calvin Henderson stood in her hallway, looking as out of place as a diamond in a dollar store. He wore dark jeans and a grey sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he was holding a manila folder, like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Miss Porter," he said, his tone all business, "I need to speak with you about a professional matter." Vanessa blinked. "How did you get my address?" "I have resourceful staff." He glanced past her into the apartment, his expression neutral but his eyes taking in everything. The mismatched furniture, the stack of bills on the coffee table, the photograph of her grandmother on the wall. "May I come in?" "Grandma, I'll call you back," Vanessa said into the phone, then reluctantly stepped aside. "I have 5 minutes. I'm working a double shift at the cafe tomorrow and need sleep." Calvin entered with the cautious air of someone visiting an alien planet. He remained standing, which somehow made the small space feel even smaller. Vanessa crossed her arms, acutely aware that she was wearing yoga pants with a hole in the knee and an oversized sweater that had seen better days. "What do you want?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. "If this is about Friday night, I already got fired from that job, so your revenge is complete." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You were terminated? Marcus said you complained about my unprofessional conduct. Which is rich, considering you were the one having a meltdown over cake geometry." "I didn't complain about you." Calvin looked genuinely surprised. "I told Patricia you showed initiative in a difficult situation." Vanessa faltered. "Oh, well, Marcus's email definitely made it sound like you wanted me gone." Then Marcus misunderstood. Calvin set the folder on her coffee table. "In fact, I'm here to offer you a job. I'm not interested in being anyone's punching bag. It's not that kind of position." He remained standing, his posture rigid. "I need someone to pose as my girlfriend for approximately 6 months. In exchange, I'll pay you $200,000. The number hung in the air like a glitching computer screen. Vanessa stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she sat down slowly on her threadbare couch. "I'm sorry. Did you just offer me $200,000 to pretend to date you?" "Yes." "Is this a prank? Are there cameras?" She looked around half seriously. "Did Maya put you up to this?" Calvin finally sat, perching on the edge of her armchair like he might catch poverty from the upholstery. "It's a legitimate business arrangement. I'm facing pressure from clients and board members regarding my personal life. They view my lack of a relationship as a professional liability. Meanwhile, you're clearly experiencing financial difficulties. Gee, thanks for the reminder. I'm offering a solution that benefits both of us." He opened the folder, revealing a thick contract. "This is a standard agreement with clearly defined parameters, public appearances at events, some social media presence, and general conduct that suggests a genuine relationship. In return, you receive compensation that could significantly improve your circumstances." Vanessa picked up the contract, her hands shaking slightly. The words blurred together. Party A agrees to photographic documentation, termination clauses, NDA provisions. It read like something from a movie, except it was happening in her cramped apartment with her holy yoga pants as witness. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is business." Calvin leaned back, finally seeming to relax marginally. "I understand it's unconventional, but consider the practical aspects. 6 months of your time in exchange for financial security. You could pay for your grandmother's care, cover your own expenses, and have a substantial cushion for whatever comes next." Vanessa thought of the bills stacked on her table, the medical expenses that kept climbing, the rejected job applications, the fear that kept her awake at 3 in the morning, wondering how she'd make rent next month. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could hire a professional actress or model, someone who actually knows how to navigate your world. That's precisely why I don't want them." Calvin's expression shifted, becoming almost vulnerable for a moment. "My clients are conservative, traditional. They want to see me with someone real, someone who doesn't look like she stepped out of a magazine or a PR campaign. The photographs from Friday night showed you defending a vendor against unfair treatment. That's the kind of authenticity that resonates." "So I'm authentic enough to fake date?" Vanessa couldn't help the bitter laugh. "You're genuine, there's a difference." He stood, smoothing his sweater. "Read the contract, think about it. I'll give you 3 days to decide." He was almost to the door when Vanessa called out, "What's the catch? There's always a catch." Calvin turned back, and for a moment something almost human flickered across his features. The catch is that you'll have to spend significant time with me, and I'm told I'm not the easiest person to be around. But I promise professional conduct and respect. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. After he left, Vanessa sat with the contract for 2 hours, reading every clause, every provision. Some were standard: appearances at events, social media posts, maintaining the illusion of affection. Others were oddly specific. She'd need to care for his dog during business trips, attend family dinners, and be available for emergency appearances with 4 hours' notice. The compensation section made her breath catch. $50,000 up front, the remainder upon completion. Even if she walked away after a month, she'd have more money than she'd ever seen. Her phone rang. Maya. "Please tell me you're sitting down," Maya said without preamble. "Because Marcus just told me why he fired you, and girl, you won't believe this." "Let me guess. Calvin Henderson complained?" "The opposite. Marcus fired you because Henderson's PR people called asking about you. Marcus panicked, thought you'd done something to attract negative attention, and cut you loose before it could blow back on him. But get this, they were actually trying to contact you for some kind of opportunity." Vanessa looked at the contract on her lap. "Yeah, I'm aware." "Wait, they already found you. What did they want?" Vanessa hesitated. The NDA provisions were clear. She couldn't discuss the arrangement with anyone. But this was Maya, her best friend since college, the person who'd held her hair during freshman year food poisoning and helped her move 4 times with nothing but a rusty truck and determination. "I can't really say. But Maya, if someone offered you a lot of money to do something totally insane but completely legal and safe, would you do it?" There was a long pause. "How much is a lot? Life-changing?" "Then hell yes. We're not getting any younger, and principals don't pay for grandma's medication." Maya's voice softened. "Whatever it is, just make sure you're protected. Read everything, get it in writing, and trust your gut." After hanging up, Vanessa pulled up her bank account on her laptop. The balance was depressing enough to make her want to cry. Then she opened her grandmother's medical bills folder and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Calvin Henderson was offering her an escape. A bizarre, unconventional, probably going to be awkward escape, but an escape nonetheless. She picked up a pen and started reading the contract again, this time making notes in the margins. If she was going to do this insane thing, she was going to do it smart. 3 days later, Calvin's phone rang at precisely 9 in the morning. "I'll do it," Vanessa said without preamble. "But I have conditions." Calvin, who'd been reviewing merger documents and half expecting her to decline, felt something unexpected: relief. "I'm listening. First, I need everything in writing, every expectation, every appearance, every rule. Second, I control what happens on social media. No posts that make me look stupid or desperate. Third, if either of us wants out, we can terminate with 2 weeks' notice, and I keep a prorated portion of the payment." Agreed to all 3. "And fourth," her voice dropped slightly, "if you ever make me feel like a purchased object or treat me the way you treated that caterer, I'm gone immediately, money or no money." Calvin was quiet for a moment. "Fair. And I apologize for that night. I was stressed and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. It won't happen again." "Good." She sounded surprised by his apology. "So, when do we start this ridiculous charade?" "There's a charity dinner on Friday. Black tie. I'll have my assistant send a car for you at 6. I don't have anything to wear to a black tie event. I'll have a stylist contact you. Consider it part of the arrangement." "This is so weird." "Yes," Calvin agreed, "but I have a feeling we'll get used to it." After hanging up, he looked at Enzo, who was sprawled dramatically across the leather couch, watching him with judgmental eyes. "Not one word," Calvin warned. Enzo yawned, showing all his teeth, and Calvin could have sworn the dog was laughing at him. The stylist, a whirlwind of a woman named Celeste, arrived at Vanessa's apartment Thursday afternoon with enough garment bags to outfit a small theater production. "Darling, we need to find your style," Celeste announced, spreading dresses across every available surface. Mr. Henderson said elegant but approachable, classic but not boring, sexy but not trying too hard. "So basically a unicorn in dress form," Vanessa muttered. Celeste grinned. "I like you already. Most of the women he's been photographed with looked like they were auditioning for ice sculpture positions. Now let's see what we're working with. 2 hours later, Vanessa stood in front of her bathroom mirror wearing a forest green silk gown that hugged her curves without strangling them. The neckline was elegant, the back dipped just enough to be interesting, and somehow, impossibly, she felt beautiful. "This is the one," Celeste declared triumphantly. "You look like someone who could hold her own in that world without losing herself. That's what he needs." "You talk like you know him," Vanessa said, studying her reflection. "I've dressed his dates before, usually last about 2 months before they can't stand his schedule or his personality." Celeste packed up the rejected dresses. "But you've got fire. I saw the photos from the gala, the way you stood up to him. He needs someone who won't just agree with everything he says." After Celeste left, Vanessa practiced walking in heels and tried not to panic. This was a job, she reminded herself, a very well-paying, very temporary job. The car arrived at exactly 6 on Friday. The driver, an older gentleman named Thomas, greeted her with a warm smile that helped settle her nerves. "First time attending one of Mr. Henderson's events?" he asked as they drove through the city. "Is it that obvious? You're not checking your phone every 30 seconds or reapplying lipstick." His usual dates treat these rides like dress rehearsals. Thomas met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "If I may say, you seem refreshingly normal. I'll try to maintain that as long as possible." Calvin was waiting in the lobby of the hotel, and Vanessa's breath caught despite her best efforts to remain unaffected. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders, and his dark hair was styled just enough to look effortlessly sophisticated. When he turned and saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, appreciation, something she couldn't quite name. "Miss Porter," he said formally, then seemed to catch himself. "Vanessa, you look beautiful." "Thank you. You clean up okay yourself." She smoothed her dress nervously. "So what's the game plan? Do we have hand signals, code words? Should I call you honey, or is that too much?" A hint of amusement touched his lips. "Let's start with being ourselves and see what happens. Just stay close, smile at the right people, and if anyone asks invasive questions, deflect to me." He offered his arm, and Vanessa took it, hyper-aware of the solid warmth of him beneath the expensive fabric. As they entered the ballroom, she felt dozens of eyes turn their way. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. "Is that Calvin Henderson with someone new? Who is she? I don't recognize her. She's lovely, isn't she? So refreshing after that awful model he dated last year." Calvin's hand moved to the small of her back, a gesture that looked protective and possessive to observers, but felt steadying to Vanessa. "You're doing great," he murmured near her ear. "Just breathe." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and champagne flutes. Vanessa met board members, clients, and society women who assessed her with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. She smiled, made small talk, and tried to remember everyone's names while Calvin's hand remained a constant grounding presence. "So how did you two meet?" asked Mrs. Ashford, an elegant woman in her 70s, who radiated old money and sharp intelligence. Vanessa glanced at Calvin, unsure how to answer. They discussed this possibility, but her mind went blank. "At an event, actually," Calvin said smoothly. "Vanessa was handling a difficult situation with remarkable grace. I was impressed." "She made you notice someone?" "That's rare." Mrs. Ashford studied Vanessa with renewed interest. "What do you do, dear?" "I'm between positions at the moment," Vanessa said honestly, because lying seemed exponentially harder than the truth. "I was in marketing, but I'm exploring new opportunities." "Smart girl. Too many young people rush into the first job that presents itself." Mrs. Ashford patted her hand. "Calvin, you should bring her to our anniversary party next month. I'd love to get to know her better." As Mrs. Ashford moved away, Calvin leaned down. "That was perfect. She's notoriously hard to impress. I just told the truth." "Exactly. That's what makes it work." His thumb traced an absent pattern on her back, and Vanessa wondered if he realized he was doing it. "Come on, I want to introduce you to someone who won't interrogate you." He led her to a corner where a younger man with kind eyes stood talking to a waiter. "Vanessa, this is Marcus Chen, my chief financial officer, and closest thing I have to a friend who isn't legally obligated to tolerate me." Marcus laughed and shook Vanessa's hand. "He's being modest. I only tolerate him 60% of the time." The other 40%, I'm plotting his downfall. He studied her with open curiosity. You're different from his usual type. Is that good or bad? Vanessa asked. Definitely good. The last one tried to get me to invest in her wellness crystal startup. Marcus grinned at Calvin's grimace. I see he hasn't told you about that particular disaster. There's a lot he hasn't told me, Vanessa said, enjoying the way Calvin looked uncomfortable. I'm starting to think I should have negotiated for embarrassing stories in the contract. Contract? Marcus's eyebrows rose. Calvin shot Vanessa a warning look, but she just smiled innocently. Inside joke. Calvin's very organized about everything. That's an understatement, Marcus said. He color codes his sock drawer. I do not... Calvin started, then stopped. Okay. I did that once when I was sick and delirious with fever. You need to let that go. Watching him banter with Marcus, Vanessa saw a different side of Calvin Henderson. He smiled more easily, laughed at himself, seemed almost normal. It was disconcerting and charming in equal measure. The evening progressed smoothly until disaster struck in the form of a champagne tower. A waiter, backing away from a demanding guest, collided with Vanessa just as she reached for a glass. The tower wobbled. Crystal glasses began cascading down in what felt like slow motion. Calvin moved faster than she'd thought possible, pulling her against him as champagne rained down around them. His arms formed a shield, his body taking the brunt of the liquid assault while protecting her from the falling glasses. When the chaos settled, they stood in a puddle of expensive champagne, Calvin's tuxedo jacket completely soaked. But Vanessa's dress remained miraculously dry. Are you all right? He asked, still holding her close, his eyes scanning her face with genuine concern. I'm fine. You're the one who just took a champagne shower. She looked up at him, noticing a droplet of liquid running down his temple. Without thinking, she reached up and wiped it away with her thumb. Thank you for protecting me. The moment stretched between them. His arms were still around her, her hand still on his face. The ballroom noise faded to a distant hum. His eyes darkened, and she felt him lean slightly closer. Mr. Henderson, I'm so sorry. The waiter rushed over, mortified. Please, let me get you towels. The spell broke. Calvin stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place. It's fine, accidents happen. He looked down at his ruined jacket. Though I think our evening just got cut short. 20 minutes later, they were in the car heading back. Calvin had changed into a spare shirt from his office, but still smelled faintly of champagne. Vanessa sat beside him, acutely aware of how close they were in the back seat. I'm sorry about your jacket, she said. It's just a jacket. I'm glad you weren't hurt. He looked at her, something soft in his expression. You did remarkably well tonight. Everyone loved you. Even when I almost caused a crystal tsunami. Especially then. You kept your composure. He paused. And you made me laugh. That doesn't happen often at these events. Happy to be of service. She meant it lightly, but it came out more sincere than intended. Thomas dropped Vanessa at her apartment first. As she gathered her small purse, Calvin touched her hand. Vanessa? About what almost happened back there? Nothing almost happened, she said quickly, her heart racing. We were just maintaining appearances. He studied her face. Right. Appearances. But as she walked to her door, she could feel his eyes on her back, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them tonight. Some line had blurred that was supposed to stay sharp and clear. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the door and touched her lips, remembering how close he'd come to kissing her, how much a traitorous part of her had wanted him to. This was just business, she reminded herself, a contract, a transaction. But contracts didn't usually make your heart race, and transactions didn't leave you wondering what might have happened if a waiter hadn't interrupted. She was in trouble, and they were only one event in. Vanessa's phone rang at 7 on Saturday morning, which was unconscionable on a weekend. She answered without checking the caller ID, her voice rough with sleep. Someone better be dying. Good morning to you too. Calvin's voice came through, sounding annoyingly alert. I have a favor to ask. Vanessa sat up, rubbing her eyes. Does the contract cover pre-coffee conversations? Because I'm pretty sure it doesn't. I'm leaving for Tokyo this afternoon, 3-day business trip. I need someone to watch Enzo. Who's Enzo? My dog. There was a pause. You did read the pet care clause in the contract, didn't you? Vanessa vaguely remembered something about animal supervision, but had assumed it was theoretical. "You want me to dog-sit?" "The professional walker quit yesterday after Enzo ate his favorite hat. My assistant is allergic, and Marcus is out of town. You're my only option." He sounded slightly desperate, which was oddly satisfying. "Please? I'll pay extra. You're already paying me an obscene amount of money." "I'll throw in dinner when I get back, a real one, not an event." Vanessa found herself smiling, despite the early hour. "What kind of dinner?" "Your choice, anywhere you want. Even that place with the 2-hour wait list that you probably think is overrated. Even there." He sighed. "Enzo's particular, but I think you'll get along." An hour later, Vanessa stood outside Calvin's penthouse, holding a key he'd had Thomas deliver, and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The apartment was everything she'd expected: sleek, modern, and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car, and abstract art that she suspected was actually important, but looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. "Enzo?" she called out. "Here, boy." A small caramel and white Cavalier King Charles Spaniel emerged from behind the couch, walking with the dignity of a monarch inspecting peasants. He sat down precisely 3 feet away from her and stared with enormous brown eyes that held what could only be described as judgment. "Hi there," Vanessa said, crouching down. "I'm Vanessa. I'll be your temporary human this weekend." Enzo sneezed. "Okay, rude, but I respect the honesty." She pulled out the instructions Calvin had left. "Let's see. You eat at 8 and 6 exactly. You prefer your water at room temperature. You only respond to commands in Italian, which is both pretentious and adorable." She looked up at the dog. "Your dad is something else, you know that?" Enzo's tail twitched, which she chose to interpret as agreement. The first few hours went smoothly. Enzo maintained his distance, watching her with suspicion as she explored the apartment. She found Calvin's home office, organized to the point of obsession, with color-coded filing systems and a desk so clean it looked unused. His bedroom was similarly Spartan, though she noticed a well-worn book on the nightstand. The Art of Connection. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Your dad reads self-help books about human relationships while hiring fake girlfriends," she told Enzo, who had followed her on the tour. "That's peak commitment issues right there." Enzo made a sound that was almost agreeable. At exactly 8 o'clock, Vanessa prepared his dinner according to the excruciatingly detailed instructions. Enzo approached his bowl, sniffed it thoroughly, looked at her, looked back at the bowl, and then, to her complete shock, began eating. "Oh, thank God," she muttered. "Calvin made it sound like you were one wrong kibble away from a hunger strike." After dinner, Enzo surprised her by jumping onto the couch next to where she sat reading. He didn't curl up immediately, but instead positioned himself to watch the window, his small body tense and alert. "What are we looking for?" Vanessa asked. "Intruders? Squirrels? The meaning of life?" Enzo glanced at her, then deliberately moved closer, resting his head near her leg. It wasn't quite cuddling, but it was something. "Oh, you're a secret softy," she said, gently scratching behind his ears. "All that attitude is just for show, isn't it?" Enzo's response was to close his eyes and lean into her hand. By Sunday evening, they'd established a routine. Enzo followed her around the apartment, insisted on sitting next to her during meals, and had developed the habit of bringing her his toys, a threadbare stuffed rabbit and a squeaky ball that had seen better days. You know this is temporary, right?" she told him as they sat on the couch. Enzo sprawled across her lap in a distinctly undignified position. "Your real dad comes back tomorrow, and I go back to my regular life." Enzo opened one eye, assessed her statement, and apparently decided it wasn't worth worrying about because he went right back to sleep. Calvin called that evening, his video chat showing him in what looked like a hotel room. "How's it going?" he asked, and she could hear genuine concern in his voice. "See for yourself." She flipped the camera to show Enzo, who was sleeping on his back with all 4 paws in the air, snoring softly. Calvin's expression shifted to something she couldn't quite name. "He never does that. He's usually, well, difficult. Maybe he just needed someone who doesn't try to force him into being something he's not." Vanessa stroked Enzo's belly gently. "He's actually really sweet once you get past the royal attitude." "He lets you touch his stomach?" Calvin sounded genuinely shocked. "He once bit my assistant for trying that." "Well, I have magic hands, apparently." She grinned at the camera. How's Tokyo? Productive but exhausting. I miss... He trailed off, then cleared his throat. How are you finding the apartment? It's lovely. Also sterile enough to perform surgery. Do you actually live here? Or is it just a very expensive storage unit for your suits? He laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. It serves its purpose. It doesn't have any personality. No photos, no weird collections, nothing that says, Calvin Henderson lives here, except the obsessive organization. I'm not good at personal touches. Clearly. She shifted, trying not to disturb Enzo. Everyone needs something that makes a space feel like home. Even you. Maybe you could help with that, he said quietly. Add some of those personal touches. That's not in the contract. Consider it a bonus project. His eyes were intense, even through the screen. I'll see you tomorrow. And Vanessa? Thank you for taking care of him. It means more than you know. After hanging up, Vanessa looked around the beautiful, empty apartment. Then she looked at Enzo, who had rolled over to place one paw on her hand, as if claiming her. Your dad is complicated, she whispered, but I think maybe he's lonely too, just like you. Enzo's tail wagged once, twice, then he settled back into sleep. When Calvin returned Monday afternoon, exhausted from travel and meetings, he found Vanessa on his couch with Enzo sprawled across her lap. She'd fallen asleep reading, her head tilted back, one hand resting on Enzo's back. The afternoon light painted them both in warm gold. For a long moment, Calvin just stood there, taking in the scene. His sterile apartment suddenly felt different, lived in, warmer, like a home instead of a hotel. Enzo, his perpetually grumpy dog, looked completely content. And Vanessa, with her messy hair and peaceful expression, looked like she belonged there. That thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like something clicking into place. Enzo woke first, lifting his head to look at Calvin. For a moment, they stared at each other in what Calvin could only describe as masculine understanding. Don't look at me like that, Calvin whispered. This is still just business. Enzo's expression clearly said he wasn't buying it. Neither, Calvin was beginning to realize, was his heart. The promised dinner happened Wednesday night at Vincenzo's, a cozy Italian restaurant that Calvin had indeed dismissed as overrated, until Vanessa's enthusiasm wore him down. She arrived wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking nothing like the polished woman from the charity gala. You're staring, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. You look different. He closed the menu he'd been pretending to read. Good different. This is actually me. The gala version was borrowed for the occasion. She picked up her menu. Fair warning, I'm ordering the most expensive pasta on here because you can afford it, and I haven't had decent Italian food since... ever, probably. Order whatever you want. He found himself smiling. How was Enzo after I picked him up? Any separation anxiety? He gave me the cold shoulder for exactly 12 minutes, then brought me his rabbit toy as a peace offering. She grinned. We're officially friends now. He's never made friends with anyone that quickly. My mother visited last Christmas, and he hid under the bed the entire time. Maybe your mother tried to give him commands in English like a heathen. Calvin laughed, surprising himself. She absolutely did. Called him stubborn and poorly trained. He's neither, he just has standards. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with mischief. Speaking of standards, I may have redecorated slightly. What does slightly mean? There's now a plant on your coffee table. A living one. I know, it's shocking and reckless, but I think you can handle the responsibility. A plant. A succulent, specifically. Very low maintenance. Even you can't kill it. She leaned forward conspiratorially. And I moved that hideous abstract painting in your bedroom 2 inches to the left. Try not to have a breakdown about it. He should have been annoyed. He hated when people touched his things, reorganized his space. But watching her eyes dance with humor, he found he didn't mind at all. You're trouble, he said. You hired me to be trouble. Or at least, to look like interesting company. She grew more serious. Speaking of which, I need to ask you something about the social media aspect of the contract. Calvin tensed. They'd agreed to some carefully curated posts, but he'd been dreading this conversation. What about it? Your Instagram is depressing. It's just corporate events and inspirational quotes about leadership. Nobody believes you have a personal life based on that evidence. I don't have a personal life. That's accurate branding. Well, now you have a fake personal life, and we need to sell it. She pulled out her phone. I think we should post a photo from tonight, something casual and real. We're not taking a selfie in a restaurant, Calvin said firmly. Why not? Normal couples do it all the time. We're not a normal couple. Vanessa's expression flickered with something he couldn't identify. Right, we're a business arrangement. Still, the appearance of normalcy is kind of the point. Before he could protest further, she'd scooted around to his side of the booth, pressed close against him and held up her phone. Smile like you're not dead inside, she instructed. I don't look dead inside. Calvin, you look like you're attending a funeral for joy itself. Come on, just one genuine smile. This is ridiculous. This is the job. She poked his side and he jerked reflexively. Oh my God, are you ticklish? Absolutely not. You totally are. She poked him again, and he couldn't stop the laugh that escaped. She snapped the photo at exactly that moment. Him laughing, slightly off guard, looking more relaxed than he had in years. Perfect, she said, examining the result. See? You're capable of human emotion. Mark this day in history. She posted it with a caption, Best pasta in the city, best company even better. Within minutes, his phone started buzzing with notifications. Calvin watched in fascinated horror as the likes climbed. People are commenting, he said, scrolling through. Finally, he looks happy. She's so pretty. They're adorable together. That's the idea. Vanessa moved back to her side of the booth as their food arrived. People want to see the human side of you. The version that exists when you're not terrifying board members. I don't terrify board members. Marcus says you once made 3 of them cry during a presentation. They were unprepared and wasting everyone's time. My point exactly. She twirled pasta on her fork. But here's the thing, I've spent time with you now and I know you're not actually a robot. You're funny and thoughtful and you stress-eat almonds when you're working late. How do you know that? There was an empty container on your desk when I was dog-sitting. Premium roasted almonds from that fancy store downtown. She pointed her fork at him. You have tells, Calvin Henderson. You're not as mysterious as you think. He should have felt exposed. Instead, he felt seen in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The next few weeks developed a rhythm. They attended 2 more events together, and each time, Vanessa surprised him. She remembered names he'd already forgotten, made small talk seem effortless, and had a way of making even the most boring corporate dinner feel bearable. But it was the little moments that started getting to him. The way she texted him photos of Enzo during her increasingly frequent dog-sitting sessions. How she'd reorganized his kitchen to make actual sense for human use. The way she laughed at his dry humor, getting the jokes that usually fell flat. The problem emerged at a gallery opening on Thursday. Vanessa wore a black dress that was somehow both elegant and approachable, and every man in the room noticed. Calvin noticed them noticing. Your girlfriend is charming, said David Morrison, a business acquaintance with too much hair gel and a reputation for chasing anything in heels. How did you manage to catch her? Charm and persistence, Calvin said tightly, watching David's gaze follow Vanessa across the room. I didn't know you had either. David laughed at his own joke. If things don't work out, I'd love her number. Calvin's jaw clenched. Things are working out just fine. He found Vanessa talking with a young artist, laughing at something the man said. The artist was leaning too close, clearly interested in more than just sharing his artistic vision. When he touched Vanessa's arm, Calvin moved without thinking. There you are, he said, sliding an arm around her waist and pulling her against his side. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to move on to the next gallery. We do? Vanessa looked confused. I thought, yes. Now. His tone left no room for argument. In the car, Vanessa turned to him with raised eyebrows. What was that about? What was what about? You practically dragged me out of there. I was having a nice conversation. He was flirting with you. So? We're at a social event. People make conversation. That wasn't conversation, that was him looking at you like you were dessert. Calvin heard the edge in his voice and tried to moderate it. We need to maintain appropriate appearances. Appropriate appearances? She studied his face in the dim light. Calvin, are you jealous? Don't be absurd. This is a business arrangement. Then why do you look like you want to punch someone? I don't... He stopped, realizing she was right. He did want to punch someone. Specifically, anyone who looked at her the way that artist had. I just take my commitments seriously. Your commitments. Her voice was flat. Right. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but Calvin couldn't stop replaying the evening, the irrational surge of possessiveness when another man touched her, the urge to stake some kind of claim, even though he had no right to. This was supposed to be simple. A contract. A transaction. Feelings weren't part of the agreement. But as he watched her walk into her building without looking back, Calvin had to admit an uncomfortable truth. Somewhere between Instagram posts and Italian dinners and a dog that chose her over everyone else, the lines had blurred, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Vanessa spent the weekend pointedly not thinking about Calvin Henderson. She deep-cleaned her apartment, visited her grandmother, and binged an entire season of a show she'd been meaning to watch. It worked brilliantly until Monday morning, when a massive floral arrangement arrived at her door. The card read, "I apologize for my behavior. I was unprofessional. C." She photographed the flowers and texted him, "These are gorgeous. Also, you were being jealous, not unprofessional. There's a difference." His response came immediately. "Can we talk? Dinner tonight?" "Can't. Promised Maya I'd help her move furniture." "Tomorrow?" "Dog sitting. Someone has a difficult spaniel who only trusts me. That's my dog and my apartment." "I know." There was a long pause before his next text. "I'll order dinner for both of us. We should talk anyway." Vanessa stared at her phone, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This was dangerous territory. They were supposed to maintain professional distance, yet somehow they'd ended up in this strange space where he sent her apology flowers, and she spent half her week in his apartment. That evening, she let herself into the penthouse to find Calvin already there, sitting on the floor with Enzo, attempting to teach the dog a new trick. "Siediti," Calvin commanded. Enzo stared at him blankly. "You're saying it wrong," Vanessa said, dropping her bag. "The emphasis is on the wrong syllable. It's siediti, not cadt. I've been saying it that way for 2 years. And he's been ignoring you for 2 years. Clearly my way is better." She crouched down. "Siediti, Enzo." Enzo immediately sat, his tail wagging with obvious pride. Calvin's expression was somewhere between impressed and wounded. "He's doing that to spite me. He's doing it because I pronounce Italian correctly." She scratched Enzo behind the ears. "Your dad has many talents, but languages aren't one of them. I speak 3 languages fluently, with an American accent that probably makes native speakers cry." She grinned at his offended expression. "It's okay. You can't be perfect at everything. You'd be insufferable. As opposed to now? Now you're only occasionally insufferable." She stood, suddenly aware of how domestic this felt, her teasing him in his apartment, Enzo sitting between them like a furry mediator. "You said something about dinner." Calvin had ordered from an upscale Thai restaurant, and they ate at his dining table while Enzo supervised from his bed, occasionally huffing if he felt excluded from the conversation. "About Thursday night," Calvin started, then seemed to lose his words. "I shouldn't have reacted the way I did." "You were jealous." Vanessa kept her tone light, even though her pulse was racing. "It's okay to admit it. It's not okay. We have an agreement. Boundaries." He set down his fork, meeting her eyes. But somewhere along the way, I started forgetting this was temporary. The air between them felt charged. Vanessa knew she should make a joke, deflect, remind them both that this was just business. Instead, she said quietly, "I know what you mean." "Vanessa, the thing is," she continued, needing to say this before she lost her nerve, "I keep telling myself you're just a job, a really well-paying, slightly bizarre job. But then you do things like remember, I prefer vanilla lattes over regular coffee, or you send flowers with handwritten apologies, or you sit on the floor teaching your dog commands he already knows, just because it gives him attention." She took a breath. "And it becomes really hard to remember that none of this is real." Calvin stood, moving around the table until he was standing in front of her. He offered his hand, and when she took it, he pulled her gently to her feet. "What if we stopped pretending?" he said softly. "What if, just for tonight, we didn't think about contracts or arrangements or what we're supposed to be doing?" "Calvin," she could feel her heart pounding. "That's a really bad idea." "I know." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes, how you reorganize my life and somehow make it better. The way Enzo looks at you like you hung the moon. That's the dog talking, not you. The dog has excellent judgment. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Vanessa, His phone rang, shrill and insistent. They both jumped. Calvin closed his eyes, clearly debating whether to answer. You should get that, Vanessa said, stepping back even though everything in her wanted to stay close. It might be important. It was Marcus, calling about an emergency with a client in London. As Calvin dealt with the crisis, Vanessa cleaned up dinner, her hands shaking slightly. When she turned around, he was off the phone, looking frustrated and exhausted. I have to fly to London. Tonight. The car's coming in an hour. He ran a hand through his hair. Terrible timing. Or perfect timing, she said, trying to sound casual. We almost did something really stupid. Would it have been stupid? She looked at him, this complicated man who hid his heart behind business suits and color-coded filing systems, who was learning to be human again, one small gesture at a time. I don't know. Maybe we both need to think about what we really want here. I know what I want. His voice was low, intense. But I don't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. You're not just an employee, Vanessa. I'm what? Important. You've become important. He moved closer again and she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of him. Can we talk when I get back? Really talk? Yeah, we should. She reached up and straightened his collar, a gesture that felt intimate and natural. Go save your company. Enzo and I will hold down the fort. At the door he hesitated. Then, impulsively, he kissed her forehead, a soft, tender gesture that felt more intimate than anything they'd shared at public events. I'll call you, he promised. After he left, Vanessa sank onto the couch and Enzo immediately jumped up to join her, resting his head on her lap. Your dad is making this very complicated, she told the dog. Enzo sighed deeply, as if to say he'd been trying to warn her. Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. So, how's the fake boyfriend treating you? She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, That's the problem. It's starting to feel less fake every day. And that, she realized, was exactly what terrified her. Calvin called from London at what would have been 3 in the morning for him, but was a reasonable 10 at night for Vanessa. She was curled up on his couch in pajama pants and one of her oversized sweaters. Enzo sprawled across her feet, watching a movie she'd already seen twice. You sound tired, she said instead of hello. I am tired. These meetings are brutal, and the time difference is destroying me. He sighed heavily. How's Enzo? Currently using my feet as a pillow and snoring like a tiny chainsaw, so thriving. She smiled at the dog. He misses you, though. He keeps checking the door. I miss him too. A pause. And you. I miss you. Vanessa's heart did a somersault. We literally just saw each other yesterday. I know, doesn't change the fact. She could hear the smile in his voice. What are you doing? Watching Pride and Prejudice for the millionth time and eating ice cream directly from the container. Living my best life. Which version? The Colin Firth one, obviously. I'm not a monster. Calvin laughed, the sound warm and genuine even through the phone. I should have guessed. You seem like a period drama person. And you seem like a I only watch documentaries about economics person, so we all have our judgments. I'll have you know I watched an entire romantic comedy last year. Under duress. Marcus's wife made me, but I stayed awake for most of it. High praise. Vanessa shifted, careful not to disturb Enzo. When do you come back? Friday, if everything goes according to plan, which means probably Saturday, knowing my luck. He was quiet for a moment. Vanessa, about what I said before I left. We don't have to do this now. You're exhausted and working. I want to. I need you to know that I meant it. You've become important to me. This stopped being just an arrangement weeks ago. Her throat tightened. For me too. Which is terrifying, by the way. Why terrifying? Because you're Calvin Henderson. You run a banking empire and intimidate people for a living. Your life is board meetings and charity galas and a tax bracket I can't even conceptualize. I'm Vanessa Porter, who got fired from her last real job and whose idea of a fancy night out is the Thai place that gives you extra spring rolls. That Thai place has excellent spring rolls. You're missing the point. No, I'm not. His voice was firm. The point is that you think we're too different. But Vanessa, you make me laugh. You make my sterile apartment feel like a home. You taught my impossible dog to trust someone. You don't treat me like a walking bank account or a means to social climbing. You treat me like a person. A slightly annoying person who needs to be reminded to eat actual meals and stop working at midnight, but a person nonetheless. I do think you're annoying, she said, her voice wavering between tears and laughter. I know it's one of your most endearing qualities. They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. He told her about the difficult client who refused to understand basic financial principles. She told him about her grandmother's latest commentary on her love life. When are you bringing that handsome man from the photos to meet me? She's seen the Instagram posts? Calvin asked. She's 83, not dead. She knows how to scroll. Vanessa smiled. She says you have kind eyes and good bone structure, so you're pre-approved. I should probably meet her properly then. If we're doing this for real? Are we doing this for real? I'd like to try. When I get back, we should talk about what that means. How to navigate this transition from fake to real. He yawned audibly. But right now, I need to sleep before I fall over. Sleep. Dream of spreadsheets and profit margins. I'll dream of you instead. After hanging up, Vanessa sat in the quiet apartment, processing everything. Enzo had woken up and was staring at her with his enormous eyes. Oh, your dad is going to ruin my life, she told him, in the best possible way. Enzo's tail wagged, which she took as approval. The rest of the week passed in a blur of texts and phone calls. Calvin sent her photos of London. Big Ben, his hotel room service breakfast, a particularly grumpy-looking pigeon. She sent him photos of Enzo in various states of dramatic repose, each captioned with increasingly absurd commentary. Enzo contemplates the meaninglessness of existence and the lack of treats. Enzo judges your interior design choices. Enzo wonders why you left him for England when England doesn't even have him. But underneath the humor, tension was building. Every conversation brought them closer to a reckoning, the moment when they'd have to decide if this thing between them was worth the risk. Friday morning, Vanessa was making coffee when her phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Vanessa Porter? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Yes? This is Diane Chen from Henderson Banking's Public Relations Department. I need to speak with you about your arrangement with Mr. Henderson. Vanessa's stomach dropped. I'm sorry? The contract. The arrangement. Diane's tone was all business. There's been a development. The media has gotten wind of certain details about how you and Mr. Henderson met. We need to get ahead of this before it becomes a problem. What kind of details? The kind that suggest your relationship isn't entirely organic. A pause. We need to meet, today. Before Mr. Henderson returns, and before this turns into a scandal that damages both your reputations and the company's image. After hanging up, Vanessa looked at Enzo, her heart pounding. So, she said to the dog, this just got a lot more complicated. Enzo tilted his head, and for once, his expression seemed to mirror her own anxiety. The fairy tale, it seemed, was about to face its first real test. The PR office was intimidatingly sleek, all glass and steel and uncomfortable modern furniture that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. Diane Chen sat behind her desk, like a general preparing for war, her expression revealing nothing as Vanessa entered. Thank you for coming on short notice. Diane gestured to a chair. Coffee? Just tell me what's happening. Vanessa's hands were clenched in her lap. What did the media find out? Diane pulled up something on her computer, then turned the screen. It was a gossip blog, the headline screaming, Banking heir's new girlfriend, hired hand or hired heart. The article was full of speculation, how Vanessa had been working at the event where they met, how she'd gone from unemployed to attending exclusive events within weeks, how the relationship seemed suspiciously convenient given Calvin's recent PR troubles. They don't have proof, Diane said calmly. Just suspicion. But suspicion is enough to plant doubt, and doubt is enough to undo everything we've built. So what do? We control the narrative. Diane leaned forward. I need to know, are your feelings for Calvin real? Because if they're not, we end this now and spin it as a brief romance that ran its course. But if they are, they are. The words came out without hesitation. I didn't expect them to be, but they are. Diane studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good, because the best way to counter rumors of a fake relationship is to show a real one. But that means you need to be prepared for scrutiny. Your past, your family, your every move will be analyzed. My grandmother is lovely, by the way. I did a background check. At Vanessa's alarmed expression, Diane smiled slightly. It's my job, and I found nothing concerning. You're exactly what you appear to be. A woman who's had some bad luck but kept her integrity intact. I don't know if I can do this. The public attention, the judgment. Can you do without Calvin? Diane's question was direct. Because that's the alternative. If this story gains traction and we can't counter it, the board will pressure him to end things. They'll see you as a liability. Vanessa thought about the last few weeks. Calvin's laugh when she teased him. The way he unconsciously sought her hand in crowds. How he'd called her at 3 in the morning just to hear her voice. Enzo's complete trust in her, as if he knew she belonged in their strange little family. I can handle it, she said firmly. What do you need me to do? For now, nothing. Just be yourself. Continue as you have been. Diane's expression softened marginally. And Vanessa, for what it's worth, I've worked with Calvin for 5 years. I've never seen him like this with anyone. Whatever started as an arrangement has become something real. Don't let the noise make you forget that. Calvin's plane landed Saturday afternoon. He texted from the car. Coming straight to the apartment. We need to talk. Vanessa was already there, had been since morning, unable to stay away. When he walked in, he looked exhausted. Rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes, the kind of tired that went bone deep. But when he saw her, his entire expression transformed. Hi, he said softly. Hi yourself. She stood from the couch where Enzo had been keeping her company. Rough week? You could say that. He dropped his briefcase, loosened his tie. Diane called me. Told me about the blog post, the meeting. Yeah, that was fun. She tried to keep her tone light. I'm apparently a gold digger now. My grandmother will be so proud. Calvin closed the distance between them, taking her hands. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this, should have protected you better. You can't control everything, Calvin, not even with color-coded filing systems. He smiled, despite everything. I missed you. I know it's only been a week, but I really missed you. I missed you too. Enzo missed you more, though. He's been very dramatic about it. She squeezed his hands. We need to talk about what happens next. I know, but first... He pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her in a tight embrace. She felt him breathe her in, felt the tension slowly leave his body. First, I just need this, just for a minute. They stood like that, holding each other in the quiet apartment, while Enzo watched with approval from the couch. The blog post doesn't matter, Calvin said finally, still holding her. Let them speculate, let them investigate. They won't find anything except 2 people who found each other in an unconventional way. Your board might disagree. Then they can disagree. He pulled back to look at her. I've spent my entire adult life doing what was expected, maintaining the right image, making the safe choices. And I was miserable. These past few weeks with you, actually pretending to be happy, made me realize I could actually be happy. I'm not giving that up. Even if it costs you, you're not a cost. You're the first thing I've wanted for myself in years. His hand came up to cup her face. I know this is complicated. I know we're still figuring things out. But I'm all in, Vanessa, if you are. Before she could answer, his phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. You should check that, she said reluctantly. It was Marcus, his voice urgent. Turn on the news. Channel 7, now. Calvin grabbed the remote, and Vanessa's heart sank as she saw the breaking news banner. Henderson Banking CEO's romantic scandal. Did he pay for love? The segment was brutal. They dug up everything. The contract, though not its actual contents, her firing from Global Tech, even photos of her in her work uniform from the charity gala. The anchor's commentary was skeptical and cutting. This is bad, Marcus said through the phone. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Some major clients are expressing concern. Calvin, you need to make a statement. Calvin's jaw was set, his expression hard. But his hand never left Vanessa's. Schedule a press conference, he said. Monday morning, I'll handle this. After hanging up, he turned to Vanessa. I'm going to tell them the truth. The truth? That yes, we met unconventionally. That yes, there was initially an arrangement. But that what started as a solution to a problem became the best thing that's happened to me. He was resolute, determined. I'm not hiding this. I'm not hiding you. Calvin, your career will survive or it won't. But I'm not losing you over this. He pulled her close again. We face this together if you're willing. Vanessa thought about running, about how easy it would be to walk away, to let him salvage his reputation without her as baggage. Then she thought about his laugh, his kindness, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Together, she agreed. But we're going to need a better PR strategy than just, we fell in love. These people want blood. Then let's give them a love story instead. Enzo barked once, sharp and approving, as if to say it was about time they figured it out. The weekend before the press conference was a strategic planning session disguised as domestic life. Diane came to the apartment Sunday morning with her team, turning Calvin's dining room into a war room of talking points and crisis management strategies. The key is authenticity, Diane explained, spreading documents across the table. We acknowledge the unconventional beginning, but emphasize the genuine relationship that developed. I'm sitting right here, Vanessa said. You can talk to me directly instead of about me. Diane had the grace to look sheepish. Sorry, force of habit. Vanessa, you're going to be asked invasive questions about your motives, your feelings, your financial situation. Are you prepared for that? No, but I'll do it anyway. Calvin reached over and took her hand. You don't have to. I can do the press conference alone. And let them think I'm hiding. No way. She squeezed his hand. We're in this together, remember? They spent hours rehearsing responses, anticipating hostile questions, preparing for every possible scenario. By evening, Vanessa's head was spinning with talking points and PR strategies. I need air, she announced, and real food, not catered sandwiches. Calvin looked at his watch, nearly 8. There's a benefit tonight. The Children's Hospital Foundation. I was planning to skip it given everything going on, but hiding makes us look guilty, Vanessa finished. We should go. Show them we're not afraid. Are you sure? She stood, pulling him up with her. Positive. Besides, I need to do something that feels normal. And apparently attending fancy charity events is our version of normal now. How disturbing is that? He laughed, and the sound cut through the tension that had been building all weekend. Very disturbing. I'll call Thomas for the car. An hour later, Vanessa stood in Calvin's bedroom wearing a midnight blue gown that Celeste had dropped off earlier. The color brought out her eyes, and the cut was elegant without being overly formal. She'd learned to do her own makeup after weeks of events, and she had to admit, she looked like she belonged in Calvin's world now. Stunning, Calvin said from the doorway, already dressed in his tuxedo. Though you could wear a paper bag and still outshine everyone there. Smooth talker. She turned to face him fully. How are you feeling about tonight? Honestly? Terrified, but also ready to stop pretending. He crossed to her, adjusting her necklace with gentle fingers. No more contracts, no more arrangements, just us facing whatever comes. Just us, she echoed, her heart full. The benefit was at the Grandview Hotel, the same venue where they'd first met, where he'd been insufferable about cake placement, and she'd called him out for it. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Should we recreate our first meeting? Vanessa teased as they entered. You could criticize the floral arrangements and I could tell you to be nicer to the staff. I was not that bad. Calvin, you made a grown man cry over centerpieces. That's an exaggeration. Ask the florist. They were still bantering when the first cameras found them. Flashes exploded, and Vanessa felt Calvin's hand tighten on her waist, protective, possessive, reassuring. Smile, he murmured. Show them we're not afraid. She smiled, and it wasn't entirely fake. Despite the cameras, the whispers, the weight of judgment, she was here with him. That counted for something. The evening proceeded cautiously. People approached them with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. Mrs. Ashford, bless her, was openly supportive. Young people always have complicated love stories, she said, patting Vanessa's hand. My husband and I met when I rear-ended his car. Sometimes the universe has an odd sense of humor about bringing people together. Calvin was pulled into a conversation with board members, and Vanessa found herself alone near the champagne fountain. That's when she saw her, a stunning woman in red mid-30s, with the kind of polished beauty that came from excellent genes and better stylists. The woman made a beeline for Calvin. Vanessa watched as she touched his arm, leaned in to whisper something in his ear, then embraced him in a hug that lasted several seconds too long. Calvin looked surprised, but not displeased. They exchanged words Vanessa couldn't hear, and the woman laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that carried across the room. Jealousy hit Vanessa like a physical blow. Sharp, unexpected, and completely unreasonable. She had no right to be jealous, except she did, because somewhere along the way, Calvin Henderson had stopped being a contract and started being hers. The woman was still touching his arm, still laughing, still looking at him like he was the only person in the room, and Calvin, damn him, was smiling back. Vanessa moved without thinking, weaving through the crowd with purpose. Several people tried to stop her for conversation, but she pushed past politely but firmly. When she reached Calvin's side, the elegant woman was saying something about old times and, "We should catch up properly." "Excuse me," Vanessa said, her voice sugar-sweet and dangerous. "Sorry to interrupt." Calvin turned, and something in her expression must have registered, because his eyes widened slightly. "Vanessa, this is Margot Sinclair. We used to—" "I don't care." Vanessa reached up, grabbed his tie and pulled him down to her level. "Right now I really don't care." Then she kissed him. Not a polite, for-the-cameras kiss. Not a contractual obligation. This was claiming, possessive, and devastatingly real. She poured every ounce of frustration, jealousy, and genuine feeling into it, all the emotions she'd been holding back for weeks. Calvin made a sound of surprise that quickly turned into something else. His arms came around her, pulling her closer, kissing her back with an intensity that made her knees weak. The world narrowed to just the two of them, his lips on hers, his hand cradling the back of her head, the thundering of her heart against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, Vanessa was breathing hard. Calvin looked completely undone, his tie askew, his carefully maintained composure shattered. "That was," he started. "Necessary," she finished. "Very necessary." Margot had the grace to look amused. "Well, I can see you're happy, Calvin. I'm glad." She smiled at Vanessa. "He's a good man. Terrible at relationships, but a good man. Take care of him." As Margot walked away, Calvin and Vanessa stood frozen, staring at each other. Around them, the benefit continued, but Vanessa was acutely aware that several dozen people had just witnessed that kiss, including, judging by the flashes, several photographers. "We're going to be on every gossip site by morning," Calvin said, his voice rough. "Good." Vanessa was still holding his tie. "Let them see. Let everyone see. I'm done pretending this isn't real." His expression transformed, shock giving way to something that looked like hope. "Vanessa, you were right. What we have isn't about contracts or arrangements anymore. It hasn't been for a while." She released his tie, smoothing it self-consciously. "I was jealous. I saw her touching you, and I wanted to throw champagne in her face, which is insane because I'm not the jealous type, except apparently I am when it comes to you." Calvin pulled her close again, right there in the middle of the ballroom with everyone watching. "For the record, Margot and I dated 5 years ago for about 3 months. It ended mutually and we're friends. That's all. I don't care about that either." She looked up at him. "I care about this. About us. About making this work despite the chaos and the media and the board members who think I'm a gold digger. Then we'll make it work." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips again, softer this time, tender. Together. When they finally left the benefit an hour later, Vanessa's phone was exploding with notifications. The kiss had already gone viral. Dozens of angles, hundreds of comments, endless speculation. But as Calvin pulled her close in the back seat of the car, as Enzo greeted them at the apartment with his typical dramatic enthusiasm, Vanessa found she didn't care about the headlines or the judgment or what tomorrow's press conference might bring. She'd kissed Calvin Henderson in front of half the city, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Vanessa woke in Calvin's guest room. She'd stayed over to prepare for the press conference, though they'd spent most of the night talking instead of sleeping. Enzo had claimed the space between them on the couch, serving as both chaperone and emotional support animal. "You don't have to come," Calvin said over coffee, his voice gentle. "I can handle this alone. We've been over this. I'm coming." Vanessa straightened his tie, a gesture that had become natural. Besides, if I hide, they'll write that I'm either ashamed or plotting my escape with your credit cards. You do realize my credit cards are right there in my wallet? He nodded toward the counter. You could have escaped weeks ago. Terrible security, really. I'm disappointed in you. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. I love that you're making jokes right now. I'm contemplating 7 different disaster scenarios. Name them. We'll tackle each one. Scenario 1. The board fires me. You start your own company, become wildly successful, and they regret everything. Scenario 2. Major clients pull out. New clients who aren't judgmental dinosaurs replace them. Scenario 3. This ruins your reputation and you can't find work. Vanessa paused. Okay, that one's scarier, but I'm resilient, and I have skills that don't disappear because of gossip blogs. Calvin pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I signed a contract, remember, with very specific clauses about public appearances. She pulled back to look at him. The difference is that now I'm not doing this because of a contract. I'm doing it because I choose to, because you're worth it. His eyes searched hers. How did I get this lucky? You offered me an obscene amount of money and had an adorable dog. I'm very shallow. Enzo barked from his bed, offended. See? Even he knows you're lying, Calvin said, kissing her forehead. The press conference was set for 10 at Henderson Banking's headquarters. Diane had orchestrated everything, the room, the lighting, even the positioning of microphones. When Calvin and Vanessa arrived hand in hand, the assembled reporters looked like sharks scenting blood. Remember, Diane whispered. Honest but strategic. You don't owe them your entire story, just enough to humanize the narrative. Calvin stepped up to the podium, and Vanessa stood beside him, visible but not overshadowing. She could feel dozens of cameras trained on them, could sense the hunger for scandal in the room. Thank you for coming, Calvin began, his voice steady and clear. I'm here to address the recent speculation about my relationship with Vanessa Porter. Yes, we met under unconventional circumstances. Yes, there was initially a business arrangement involved. But what started as a solution to a PR problem became something I never expected. Something real. A reporter shouted, "So you admit you paid her to pretend to be your girlfriend?" I offered her employment at a time when she needed it, yes. But what developed between us went far beyond any contract. Calvin glanced at Vanessa, and the softness in his expression was impossible to fake. Vanessa taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. That letting someone into your carefully controlled life isn't losing control. It's finding something worth more than control. Miss Porter, another reporter called out, how can we believe this is genuine and not just an extension of your paid arrangement? Vanessa stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice firm. You can't. Not really. Because you don't know me, and you don't know what happened between Calvin and me over these past months. All you see are the public moments, the photographs, the appearances. She took a breath. But I can tell you this, I grew up believing that hard work and integrity mattered, that you don't take shortcuts or compromise your values for convenience. When Calvin first approached me with his offer, I almost said no. It felt wrong, but I was desperate, and desperation makes you consider things you normally wouldn't. She felt Calvin's hand find hers, a silent show of support. What I didn't expect was to actually like him, to discover that the man behind the intimidating exterior was funny and kind and had a ridiculous dog who only takes commands in Italian. Scattered laughter rippled through the room. I didn't expect to fall in love with someone I was supposed to be pretending to date, but life doesn't always follow the script. But the money, someone started. The money matters, Vanessa interrupted. Let's not pretend it doesn't. Aunt saved my grandmother's life by paying for treatments we couldn't afford. It gave me breathing room to figure out my next steps after losing my job unfairly. I'm not ashamed of accepting help when I needed it. But Calvin could have hired anyone. He chose me because I stood up to him when he was being unreasonable to service staff. He chose me because I was real, not because I was available. Calvin squeezed her hand. I fell in love with her because she reorganized my kitchen to make actual sense, taught my impossible dog to trust again, and called me out every time I was being a workaholic robot. She made me want to be a better person, not a better CEO. What about the board? A business reporter stood. There are rumors of emergency meetings, concerns about your judgment. The board hired me to run this company. which I've done successfully for 5 years. My personal life is my own." Calvin's voice hardened slightly. "But I understand their concerns and I'm prepared to address them through proper channels. What I won't do is pretend that the best thing that's happened to me is somehow a liability." Mrs. Ashford's voice cut through from the back of the room. "For what it's worth, I've watched Calvin Henderson grow this company, and I've watched him these past months with Vanessa. I've never seen him happier or more human. Some of us older clients appreciate that he's finally living his life, not just managing ours." She stood, elegant and commanding. The Ashford Group stands behind him, completely. A murmur went through the room. Mrs. Ashford's endorsement carried significant weight. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, some hostile, some genuinely curious. Through it all, Calvin and Vanessa stood together, fielding inquiries with honesty, tempered by dignity. Finally, Diane stepped forward. "That's all the time we have, thank you." As they left the podium, Vanessa heard one reporter say to another, "Did you see the way he looked at her? That's not faking it." "Yeah," the other replied. "That kiss at the benefit last night, nobody stages chemistry like that." In Calvin's office, away from the cameras and chaos, Vanessa finally let herself collapse onto his leather couch. Enzo, who'd been waiting with Marcus, immediately jumped up to greet her. "That was terrifying," she said. "You were incredible." Calvin sat beside her, pulling her against him. "Honest, strong, real, everything I'm not good at being. You were pretty good at it today, too." She kissed his jaw. "Very romantic declarations, Mr. Henderson." "I meant every word." Marcus poked his head in. "The board wants to meet." "But Calvin, early reports from the press conference are actually positive. People are calling it a modern love story. Banking Air Fine's heart is trending on social media." "Ugh, that's so cheesy," Vanessa groaned. "Cheesy sells," Marcus grinned. "Also, 3 major clients just called to say they support you. Mrs. Ashford is apparently calling everyone she knows." After Marcus left, Calvin and Vanessa sat in comfortable silence, processing everything. "So," Vanessa said eventually, "we survived. What now?" "Now we figure out what a real relationship looks like." Calvin played with her fingers. "Without contracts or clauses, or predetermined endpoints." "That sounds terrifying and perfect." She shifted to face him. "Though I should probably get my own apartment back. Living in your guest room is starting to feel weird. Or you could move into the master bedroom." The words came out quickly, almost nervously. "With me if you wanted." Vanessa's heart stuttered. "Calvin, too fast. That was too fast." He looked chagrined. "Forget I said anything. I didn't say no." She cupped his face. "I said your name. Which I do when I'm processing something important." She smiled. "Ask me again in a few weeks, when we've figured out how to actually date without cameras and contracts and crisis management." "Deal." He kissed her, slow and sweet. "But the offer stands. Whenever you're ready." Enzo, apparently tired of being ignored, barked sharply. "Yes, you can move in too," Vanessa told the dog. "Obviously. You're part of the package." As they sat together in Calvin's office, with the city stretching out below them and the weight of the morning finally lifting, Vanessa felt something settle in her chest. This was real. Messy and complicated, and occasionally terrifying, but real. And she wouldn't have it any other way. 2 weeks after the press conference, life had found a new rhythm. The media storm had calmed to occasional ripples of interest. The board had grudgingly accepted that Calvin's personal life was, in fact, personal. And Vanessa had moved most of her clothes into Calvin's apartment, though she maintained her own place, for independence and sanity. "You're here 6 nights a week," Calvin pointed out over breakfast on Saturday. "That's not very independent. The 7th night is crucial. It maintains the mystery." Vanessa stole a piece of his toast. "Besides, Enzo needs me. Look at him." Enzo was sprawled across Calvin's feet under the table, groaning dramatically as if the weight of the world rested on his small shoulders. "He's been fed, walked, and given treats. He's fine," Calvin said. "He's emotionally complex. He needs stability and routine." "You're projecting onto my dog." "Our dog," Vanessa corrected automatically, then froze. "I mean, our dog," Calvin agreed, smiling. "I like the sound of that." Before Vanessa could respond, her phone rang. The care facility. Her stomach dropped. Calls from them rarely brought good news. "Miss Porter, your grandmother had a small spell this morning. She's fine, but she's asking for you." Vanessa was on her feet immediately, already grabbing her bag. Calvin was right behind her. "I'm coming with you," he said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He was already putting on his shoes. "Besides, it's time I properly met the woman who raised someone as stubborn as you. I need to know what I'm dealing with." Grandma Lillian's room at Brookside Care Facility was bright and cheerful, decorated with photos spanning 8 decades of life. When Vanessa rushed in, her grandmother was sitting up in bed, looking annoyed rather than ill. "All this fuss over a little dizzy spell," Lillian complained. "They treat me like I'm made of glass." "You are 83 and recovering from pneumonia," Vanessa said, hugging her carefully. "They're supposed to fuss." "Well, I don't like it." Lillian's sharp eyes moved past Vanessa to Calvin, standing respectfully near the door with Enzo's carrier in hand. "And who's this handsome young man? The one from the photographs?" "Grandma, this is Calvin Henderson. Calvin, my grandmother, Lillian Porter." Calvin stepped forward, offering his hand with genuine warmth. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Porter. Vanessa talks about you constantly." "Does she now?" Lillian shook his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "And what exactly does she say?" "That you taught her to stand up for herself, that you make the best apple pie in 3 states, that you once told off a city councilman for trying to cut library funding." Calvin's smile was genuine. "She says you're her hero." Lillian's expression softened. "Flattery will get you everywhere, young man. Sit, sit. Both of you." She noticed the carrier. "And what's in there?" Calvin opened it, and Enzo emerged with his usual caution, sniffing the unfamiliar environment. Then he saw Lillian, and, to everyone's surprise, walked directly to her bed, sitting politely at attention. "Well, aren't you a gentleman?" Lillian reached down to pet him. "What's his name?" "Enzo," Calvin said. "He usually hates new people." "Animals and children always know," Lillian said wisely, scratching behind Enzo's ears. "They can sense character." She fixed Calvin with a penetrating stare. "So, you're the man who hired my granddaughter to pretend to date you." Vanessa winced. "Grandma." "It's all right," Calvin said. "Yes, ma'am, I did. It was calculated and transactional, and I'm not proud of how it started. But falling in love with her, that wasn't part of any plan. That was the smartest accident of my life." "Humph, pretty words." But Lillian was smiling slightly. "Vanessa's parents died when she was 12. Car accident. I raised her from that day forward. She's my whole world." "I understand," Calvin said quietly. "Do you?" "Because I won't watch her get hurt. She's been through enough. Bad jobs, bad luck, rejection after rejection. She keeps getting back up, because that's who I raised her to be. But everyone has a breaking point." Lillian's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You have money and power. If this doesn't work out, you'll move on. But her? She'll be left picking up the pieces." "Grandma," Vanessa was mortified. "We're fine, more than fine." "Let him answer," Lillian commanded. Calvin met the older woman's eyes steadily. "You're right to be protective. If I were in your position, I'd probably threaten me with something creative involving power tools." He smiled briefly. "But here's what I can promise. I will never take Vanessa for granted. I will support her dreams, even when they're inconvenient for mine. I will fight for her, with her, and occasionally against her when she's being stubborn about accepting help." He glanced at Vanessa with such tenderness that her eyes stung. "She made me remember how to be human. I'm not letting that go." Lillian studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good answer. You may date my granddaughter." "Oh my God," Vanessa muttered. "I'm 29 years old. I don't need permission." "Respect your elders," Lillian said primly. "Now, Calvin, tell me about this banking business. Vanessa says you're very successful, but she doesn't understand numbers, so I need details." What followed was the strangest, most delightful hour. Lillian interrogated Calvin about everything: his business philosophy, his relationship with his parents, his opinion on current economic policy, even his stance on pineapple on pizza. Controversial, he admitted, but he was in favor. "She's treating you like a job interview," Vanessa whispered during a moment when Lillian was fussing with Enzo. "She's protecting you," Calvin whispered back. "I respect that." By the time they left, Lillian had extracted promises of weekly visits and demanded that Calvin bring her financial reports to review. Someone needs to make sure you're not mismanaging that company. In the car, Vanessa turned to Calvin. I'm sorry about the interrogation. She can be intense. She's wonderful. I see where you get your strength from. He took her hand. And your ability to terrify people with pointed questions. She liked you. She doesn't like most people. The feeling is mutual. He raised her hand to his lips. Though I'm slightly concerned about having to submit quarterly reports on our relationship status. Vanessa laughed. Welcome to the family, Mr. Henderson. That evening, back at the apartment, they ordered takeout and settled on the couch with Enzo between them, watching a movie neither was really paying attention to. You know what I realized today, Calvin said during a particularly boring action sequence. I've never properly taken you on a date. A real one where the point is just spending time together, not maintaining appearances or attending events. We've been on dates, kind of. To know we've been on strategic public appearances that looked like dates, he shifted to face her. I want to take you somewhere just because I want to see you happy. No cameras, no agendas, no crisis management. Like what? What do you love? What would make a perfect day for you? Vanessa thought about it. Honestly, something simple. A bookstore where I can browse for hours. Coffee at a place that doesn't care about presentation, just taste. Maybe a walk somewhere pretty. Normal couple things. Then that's what we'll do, tomorrow, just us. And Enzo? The dog's ears perked up at his name. Obviously Enzo too. He'd never forgive us otherwise. The next day, Calvin took her to an independent bookstore in Brooklyn that she'd mentioned wanting to visit. They spent 2 hours wandering the stacks, and Calvin learned that Vanessa had an addiction to historical fiction and a weakness for beautiful cover art. You don't have to buy me books, she protested when he appeared with a stack of 6. I'm not buying them for you. I'm buying them for me to read to you while you fall asleep. At her surprised expression, he added, You mentioned once that your grandmother used to read to you. I thought maybe you'd like that. Vanessa felt her throat tighten with emotion. You pay attention to everything, don't you? Only when it comes to you. They had coffee at a tiny cafe where the barista clearly had no idea who Calvin was and seemed personally offended by anyone who didn't appreciate her latte art. They walked through Prospect Park with Enzo on his leash, stopping to watch dogs play and children chase pigeons. This is perfect, Vanessa said as they sat on a bench, watching the sun start its descent. Just perfect. Calvin pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. It really is. As they walked back to the car, Enzo trotting happily between them, Vanessa realized something. She was completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully in love with Calvin Henderson, not because he was successful or wealthy or could open doors with a single phone call, but because he read to her and met her grandmother with respect and took her to bookstores on Sundays just to see her smile. This was real. This was them, and she was ready for whatever came next. 3 months after the press conference, life had settled into something that felt almost normal. Vanessa had officially moved into Calvin's apartment, bringing her mismatched furniture and collection of houseplants that now transformed the sterile penthouse into something that actually felt like a home. She'd also started a new position as marketing director for a non-profit, work that fulfilled her in ways her corporate job never had. It was a Friday evening in late spring when everything shifted again. Calvin came home early, which was unusual enough to make Vanessa look up from her laptop where she'd been working at the dining table. He was carrying a small velvet box, and her heart immediately started doing gymnastics. Before you panic, he said quickly, this isn't a ring. I mean, not that kind of ring. I mean... He stopped, laughing at himself. I'm handling this terribly. You really are. Vanessa closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. What is it? He sat beside her, placing the box on the table. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny dog that looked remarkably like Enzo. It's beautiful, she said softly. There's an engraving. Calvin took the bracelet, turning it to show her the inside. For when everything became real, Vanessa felt tears prick her eyes. Calvin, I love you, he said simply. Not because of any contract or arrangement, not because you're convenient or advantageous. I love you because you make me laugh when I'm taking myself too seriously, Because you rearrange my kitchen and my life, and somehow both work better. Because you see me, not the CEO, not the Henderson heir, just me, and you choose me anyway. Of course I choose you. She cupped his face with both hands. You ridiculous, wonderful man. I love you too, so much it terrifies me sometimes. He fastened the bracelet around her wrist, his fingers gentle and sure. When he looked up at her, his eyes held a question. Stay tonight, he said quietly. Really stay. Not in the guest room, not with any distance between us. Just be with me. Vanessa's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this moment for weeks, sleeping in the same apartment but different rooms, sharing increasingly intimate kisses that always stopped before going further. She'd felt the tension building between them, the unspoken want that hummed in every touch. I've been waiting for you to ask, she admitted. His smile was slow and devastating. I've been terrified to ask. What if you weren't ready? What if I pushed too hard? You could never push too hard. You're too busy being careful with me. She stood, pulling him up with her. But I'm ready now. I've been ready. Calvin's bedroom was dimly lit, the city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating shadows and soft illumination. He turned to face her, and she could see the vulnerability in his expression. This man who commanded boardrooms and managed millions, suddenly uncertain. I haven't done this in a while, he confessed. Real intimacy, without walls or guards or anything in between. Me neither. Vanessa stepped closer, closing the distance. We'll figure it out together. He reached for her slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. When she didn't pull away, his hands came to rest on her waist, warm and steady. He kissed her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Soft, exploring, asking permission with every movement. Vanessa responded by deepening the kiss, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. She felt him shudder against her, heard the quiet sound he made when she pulled him closer. Vanessa, he breathed against her lips. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They moved together to the bed, a tangle of nervous laughter and gentle touches. Calvin unbuttoned her shirt with careful fingers, pressing kisses to each new expanse of skin revealed. When he reached her shoulder, he paused. You're so beautiful, he whispered, inside and out. You know that, right? She felt suddenly shy under his gaze, exposed in a way that had nothing to do with clothing. Calvin. No, listen. He cupped her face, making her meet his eyes. You're brilliant and strong and brave. You stood up to me when we first met. You took a risk on a crazy arrangement. You defended me in front of the entire world. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Tears escaped down her cheeks. Stop making me cry before we make love. He smiled, brushing away her tears with his thumbs. I can do that, but I needed you to know. This isn't just physical for me. This is everything. It's everything for me too, she whispered. What followed was a dance of discovery, learning what made the other gasp, where to touch, how to move together. Calvin was achingly gentle, his hands trembling slightly as he caressed her, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. He kissed her everywhere, her shoulders, her collarbones, the curve of her hip, worshipping her body with a devotion that made her feel cherished beyond words. When they finally came together, it was with sighs and whispered names, with Calvin's forehead pressed against hers as he moved slowly, carefully, always watching her face to make sure she was with him. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Vanessa, I love you so much. I love you too, she managed, pulling him closer, needing him closer. Don't stop. The world narrowed to just the two of them. The slide of skin on skin, the rhythm they found together, the building intensity that made everything else fade away. When Vanessa cried out his name, clutching at his shoulders, Calvin followed moments later with a groan that sounded like relief and joy and complete surrender. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, both trying to process what had just happened. Calvin pulled the sheet over them, then gathered Vanessa against his chest, his arms secure around her. That was... he started. Yeah, she agreed, because words felt inadequate. He laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest. I was going to say perfect, but I'll accept speechless agreement. Vanessa traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. I never knew it could be like that. So intense, but also so safe. Like I could be completely vulnerable with you and know you'd never hurt me. I won't, he promised fiercely, kissing the top of her head, not intentionally, and if I do accidentally, I'll spend however long it takes making it right. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, occasionally sharing soft kisses and quiet laughter. From somewhere in the apartment, they heard Enzo's indignant bark. "We forgot about the dog," Vanessa said, giggling. "He'll survive. This moment is ours." Calvin tightened his arms around her. "Stay. Sleep here. Wake up with me tomorrow and every tomorrow after that." "That sounds like forever talk, Mr. Henderson." "Maybe it is." He pulled back to look at her, his expression serious but hopeful. Would that be so terrible? Vanessa thought about the past several months, how she'd gone from unemployed and desperate to loved and secure, how Calvin had transformed from an arrogant stranger to the person who knew her better than anyone, how they'd built something real from the most artificial of beginnings. "No," she said finally, "that wouldn't be terrible at all. That would be everything." He kissed her again, slow and deep, full of promise. And as they drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other, the city lights painting patterns across their skin, Vanessa knew that she'd found something she hadn't even been looking for. She'd found home. 6 months after that transformative night, Calvin proposed properly. Not at a fancy restaurant or during a public event, but on a random Tuesday morning when Vanessa was making pancakes in one of his shirts, her hair a mess, singing off-key to the radio. He got down on one knee right there in the kitchen, with Enzo as their only witness, and asked her to marry him with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. She said yes before he even finished the question. The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family at a garden venue upstate. Grandma Lillian sat in the front row, beaming with pride, occasionally critiquing the flower arrangements, but ultimately declaring it acceptably romantic. Marcus served as best man and spent his entire speech roasting Calvin's terrible work-life balance and general emotional constipation before meeting Vanessa. Mrs. Ashford sent an obscenely expensive gift and a card that read, "I knew you two were genuine from the start. Well done." Enzo, wearing a tiny bow tie, served as ring-bearer and took his duties very seriously. Now, a year and a half after the wedding, Vanessa stood in the doorway of their home. No longer the sterile penthouse, but a brownstone in Brooklyn with actual character and a yard for Enzo, watching her husband play with their 9-month-old daughter. "Emma Lillian Henderson," Calvin cooed, lifting the giggling baby above his head. "You are the most brilliant child in the history of children." "Yes, you are. You say that every day," Vanessa said, smiling at the scene. "Because it's true, every day." Calvin brought Emma down to kiss her chubby cheeks. She smiled at me this morning. A real smile, not just gas. It was definitely gas. "You wound me." But he was grinning as he settled Emma in her bouncer. "How was your meeting?" Vanessa had recently been promoted to VP of Marketing at her nonprofit, a position she loved that actually let her leave work at reasonable hours. "Good. We got funding for the youth program. I'll need to travel to Boston next month for 2 days, but I'll take time off. We'll make it work." Calvin crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "We always do. Look at you, Mr. Work-Life Balance. I remember when you couldn't leave the office before 8. That was before I had something worth coming home to." He kissed her softly. 3 somethings if you count the dog. 4, Vanessa corrected, her hand moving to her stomach. "I was going to wait to tell you, but I can't keep secrets from you." Calvin's eyes widened. "You're about 6 weeks along. I took 3 tests this morning to be sure." His response was to sweep her into a kiss that made her toes curl, then carefully set her down as if she were made of glass. "Are you okay? Do you need to sit? Should you be working? Maybe you should take it easy." "Calvin, breathe. I'm pregnant, not dying." "I know, I just—" He looked overwhelmed and delighted and terrified all at once. "We're having another baby. We're having another baby." Emma chose that moment to start fussing, and Enzo immediately trotted over to her bouncer, placing his head near her hand. The baby's fingers tangled in his fur, and she quieted immediately. "He's going to be so jealous when the new baby comes," Vanessa observed. "He'll adjust. He's good with change now." Calvin scooped up their daughter. "Remember when we first got Emma home and he refused to acknowledge her existence for 3 days? Then he decided she was his responsibility and hasn't left her side since. They moved to the living room, a space that bore no resemblance to Calvin's old apartment. There were toys scattered on the floor, family photos on every surface, Vanessa's plants in every corner, and a comfortable chaos that spoke of a life fully lived. "Do you ever miss it?" Vanessa asked, settling on the couch. "The old life, the control, the order, the perfectly maintained image." Calvin sat beside her, Emma drowsing against his shoulder. "Not even for a second. That wasn't a life. It was an existence. This," he gestured around at the beautiful mess. "This is everything." His phone buzzed, a reminder about the board meeting tomorrow. He glanced at it, then deliberately set it face down. "The old me would have spent the evening preparing," he said, "reading reports, rehearsing talking points. And the new you? The new me is going to order Thai food, watch whatever show you're currently obsessed with, and probably fall asleep on the couch while Emma drools on my shirt." He smiled, "Because that's what matters." Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder, careful not to disturb the baby. "I love you, you know, still, always, even when you leave wet towels on the bathroom floor. I love you too, even when you reorganize my office and I can't find anything for a week. It's called a filing system, Calvin. You should try it. I have a filing system. It's called organized chaos. That's just chaos. Agree to disagree." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Enzo patrol the room with his usual diligence. The dog had aged well, though he moved a bit slower now, and his muzzle had some grey, but his devotion to his family remained absolute. "He's a good dog," Calvin said softly. "The best dog." Vanessa smiled. "Remember when you told me he never liked anyone? And now he's basically Emma's personal bodyguard. He has good taste. Takes after his father. His father who once made a caterer cry over cake placement. Are we ever going to let that go?" "Never. It's part of our origin story." She turned to look at him, this man who'd started as a contract and become her everything. "We should write it down for the kids, how we really met, the whole absurd, unconventional truth. They'll think we're crazy. They'll think it's romantic, in a weird, modern, slightly corporate way." Calvin shifted carefully so Emma was secure in one arm, then pulled Vanessa closer with the other. "Do you have any regrets about how we started?" "Not one." She meant it completely. "If you'd approached me normally, at a bar, or through friends, I probably would have been too intimidated to talk to you. But the contract, that made you human. It showed me you were flawed and desperate and willing to try something crazy. That's when I started to like you. When I was at my most pathetic. When you were at your most real." She kissed his jaw. "And look where it got us." As if in agreement, Emma made a small, contented sound in her sleep, and Enzo settled at their feet with a satisfied huff. 2 years later, the backyard of the Brooklyn brownstone was alive with chaos. Emma, now nearly 3, was chasing Enzo around the garden, her curls bouncing with each step, while the dog pretended to run but never quite escaped her grasp. On a blanket nearby, 1-year-old James, named after Calvin's late father, sat surrounded by toys, methodically sorting them by color, with the kind of focus that suggested he'd inherited his father's organizational tendencies. Calvin appeared from the house carrying a tray of lemonade and sandwiches, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He'd left work early, something he did frequently now, to spend the afternoon with his family. "Daddy!" Emma shrieked, abandoning her pursuit of Enzo to run full speed at Calvin. He set down the tray just in time to catch her, swinging her up into his arms. "Hey, Butterfly, having fun?" "Enzo's being slow," Emma complained. "He won't run fast." "He's getting old, sweetheart. We have to be gentle with him." As if understanding, Enzo trotted over and sat down, panting slightly. Emma wiggled out of Calvin's arms to pet him carefully, her small hands gentle on his fur. Vanessa emerged from the house, carrying a vase of fresh flowers from the garden. She was wearing a sundress, her hair loose, looking nothing like the desperate woman who'd accepted a crazy proposal years ago, and everything like the confident, happy woman she'd become. "Did I miss anything?" she asked, setting the flowers on the outdoor table. "Just Emma filing a complaint about Enzo's athletic performance," Calvin said, pulling her close for a kiss. "And James has organized his toys by color, shape, and probably emotional resonance." Vanessa laughed, moving to check on their son. "He's definitely yours." "Hey, you're the one who reorganizes the pantry for fun." That's called being a functional adult, Calvin. They settled on the blanket together, their children playing nearby, Enzo supervising with his usual diligence. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, and for a moment Calvin just absorbed it all. The sound of Emma's laughter, James's concentrated babbling, Vanessa's hand in his, Enzo's contented presence. "What are you thinking?" Vanessa asked softly. "That I almost missed this." He gestured at the scene. "If I'd stayed on my original path, I'd be working late right now, alone in an empty apartment, reviewing reports, thinking that was success. But you didn't stay on that path." "No. I hired a fake girlfriend who turned into my real wife, my best friend, and the mother of my children." He smiled. "Best business decision I ever made." "I'm not a business decision." "You're right. You're an investment that keeps paying dividends." At her amused expression, he added, "I'm going to stop using financial metaphors now." "Please do." Emma ran over, climbing into Vanessa's lap. "Mommy, tell the story again." "Which story, Butterfly?" "How you and Daddy met." "The funny one with the cake." Vanessa and Calvin exchanged glances, both smiling. "Well," Vanessa began, "Daddy was at a party being very bossy about cake placement." "I was ensuring quality standards," Calvin interjected, "and Mommy told him he was being mean to the nice caterer." "And Daddy thought Mommy was trouble," Calvin continued, taking over the story. "But the good kind of trouble, the kind that changes your whole life." "Then what?" Emma asked, though she'd heard this story 100 times. "Then Daddy asked Mommy to be his pretend girlfriend," Vanessa said, which was silly and strange, but Mommy said yes, because she needed the money, and Daddy needed someone to tell him when he was being ridiculous. "But then it stopped being pretend," Calvin finished, "because sometimes the best things start in the weirdest ways." Emma pondered this seriously. "Like how I pretend Enzo can talk, but he really can't." "Exactly like that," Vanessa said, hiding her smile. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Calvin thought about the journey that had brought them here, the contract that had seemed so transactional, the dog that had brought them together, the press conferences and scandals and moments of doubt, all of it leading to this, a life he hadn't planned but couldn't imagine living without. "Hey," Vanessa said softly, interrupting his thoughts. "New clause for our relationship contract?" "We don't have a relationship contract anymore." "Then we'll make a new one. Just one clause. Keep choosing each other, every day, no matter what." Calvin pulled her closer, careful not to disturb Emma, who was drowsing in her lap. "Deal. Though I'd like to add a sub-clause about you not reorganizing my office without warning." "Denied. That's non-negotiable." "Then I'd like to add that I get to make you coffee every morning." "Accepted. And you have to read to me before bed." "Done. And we take one completely unplanned adventure per year. As long as Enzo can come." "Obviously." They sealed the new agreement with a kiss, while Emma giggled and James clapped his hands, and Enzo barked his approval. The contract that had started it all was long gone, filed away in some forgotten drawer. But the love it had accidentally created, that was forever. And Calvin Henderson, once the most controlled man in the city, had learned something invaluable. The best things in life were the ones you couldn't plan for, the ones that came from taking a risk on something unusual, someone unexpected, and letting it change you completely. "I love you," he told Vanessa as the stars began to appear. "I love you too," she replied. "Best fake relationship ever. Best real relationship ever." Same thing. And in the end, it was. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.